Anna, and I'm a healer and a coach. And in this channel, I help you gain clarity on practical spirituality and emotional intelligence concepts so you can use them to create a fulfilling life. So the topic of today is how to manage anxiety. But before we get started, I wanted to mention that I am giving away a free copy of the ebook Tips for Living an Awakened Life, which includes a variety of tools from different authors, including myself, that are intended to help you along your growth journey. And all you have to do to claim the free ebook is subscribe to my channel and click the little notification bell, and then go to my website and subscribe there. And the link to the subscription page will be in the description box of this video. And once you subscribe also to my website, I will send you an email that is going to include the link that you need to click so you can download the video. It is a free copy and is an ebook, and I hope that is very helpful to you. So if you're interested, please go ahead and do so. Again, I will include the link and the information down in the description box to this video. So now to our video. The topic of today, like I said before, is anxiety. And what I want to do in this video is, first I want to talk a little bit about my beliefs around anxiety and how I approach it in my practice from a long-term perspective. And then I'll get to the meat of the video, which is to give you some tips of how you can manage anxiety. Now, the first thing that I need to mention is I am not a medical or mental health professional, okay? So I'm going to try and stay away from clinical or detailed definitions of what anxiety is in this video because I don't want YouTube to flag me, and I am not a mental health professional, and I am not a medical professional. But I think we all know what anxiety feels like, right? Because we've all experienced anxiety. So suffice it to say that anxiety is a state of arousal that we perceive as negative, right? And it is a biological and psychological response to stress or to fear. And different people, like I said before, we've all experienced our anxiety in our lives, but it's usually related to a particular time, specific to a particular time or a particular situation. And the reason why I want to mention that is because I want to differentiate that from an anxiety disorder. Now, again, because I am not a medical mental health professional, I'm not going to get into all of the differences, and I'm not going to get into details of an anxiety disorder. What I will say is if you feel that you have an anxiety disorder, please go ahead and visit your mental health professional. But what I want to focus in this video is really the common day experience of anxiety. Like I said, we all get it, and we all know what it feels like, right? But one of the things that I do want to talk about is how I approach anxiety in my practice. How I deal with anxiety with my clients, with myself, and even with my friends or the people that surround me. And the reason why I want to bring that up is because there is a difference between managing your anxiety at the moment that is happening, right? Meaning finding a coping mechanism or a way to reduce the anxiety so you can remain functional and continue going about your day, versus the approach of healing, finding a more permanent or a more long-term solution to the anxiety, which is really what I focus on in my practice. Now, in reality, I do both, right? But the approach that I take in my practice is that I want to help people really understand what the root cause of their anxiety is so they can address it and move forward and have a life that is really, life is never going to be rid of anxiety as a whole, but so they can have a life that is more fulfilling and joyful, where anxiety is a part of that life, but it's not something that happens consistently, okay? So, like I was saying before, in my practice, the approach that I take is an approach that is intended to address anxiety in a more long-term way. And what I try to do is to work with the subconscious to get to the root cause of the trauma. because I believe that all anxiety, or at least most anxiety in my personal experience, is a trauma response. It's actually triggering in us feelings, emotions, or a particular state that we've experienced before. And we may be experiencing it in a situation that is either exactly the same or in some way similar to our original trauma, or the trauma that we suffered in the past. And oftentimes that original trauma comes from childhood. So what I do with my clients, and what I do for myself in my own practice, is that when I'm suffering anxiety, I try to really understand what triggered that feeling, what triggered that emotion, and then follow the breadcrumbs and track it all the way back to its origin, so that I can then start to unravel where it came from, why, so that I really, once I have that full understanding, I can start working with the beliefs that were created and the responses that were created as a result of that anxiety, so that I can address them and I can move forward with my life after getting that relief and that resolution. So the one thing that I want to mention is T.L. Swan, which is one of my mentors, defines trauma as distress without resolution. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because I was just talking about trauma a minute ago, and we have this idea that trauma is this life-altering event, or this really massive, dramatic event or situation that happened in our lives, like maybe a parental divorce or a death in our family. But trauma is really a lot of things. There's a lot of simple things that can happen during our childhood that can create trauma. So that's why I wanted to use for definition of trauma being distress without resolution. Because something as simple as, a little baby crying, I don't remember what the name of the method is, but I know there is a method of raising children that when an infant is crying, you don't actually soothe the baby, or you don't approach the baby, so that they learn to self-soothe. Now, I'm not a parent, so I'm not here to talk about what the merits or problems with that particular technique are. But I'm using that as an example because something like that, while it is something that a parent is doing not necessarily with the intent of causing trauma, they're actually doing it with the intent of raising a self-reliant child and a child that is stronger, are types of things that can create trauma. And when you tell that to someone, that doesn't actually sound like trauma, but it can be. There's a variety of different things that can create trauma and in a child, because the brain of a child doesn't, a child's cognitive abilities are not fully developed, so they don't often understand things from the perspective that an adult can understand it. So that actually so something that would make sense to an adult, like the particular technique that I was discussing, can actually create trauma to a child. So using that as an example, that child can grow to become an adult that is very uncomfortable crying or showing painful or negative emotions in front of other people, because they assume other people are going to think they're weak or are going to abandon them or walk away from them, right? So I hope that's clear. But I think I'll give you another example that I think maybe is a little bit clearer. But children who have abandonment trauma, right? So I happen to be one of those children, right? So when you have, I was adopted, so when you have abandonment trauma, and it's not resolved, it's not relieved in your upbringing, when you grow up as an adult, there's a variety of things, a variety of ways that can manifest itself in an adult relationship. But one of the things that can happen is that it can create a state of anxiety for you in any situation where you are interpreting someone's behavior as abandonment. So, for example, you may be having an argument, or I'll use myself as an example. Let's say I am dating this man and I'm having an argument with him about something, I don't know, something innocuous, like where we're going to go for dinner or something like that, right? It gets into a really heated argument and he walks away from me. And my immediate response is a response of increased anxiety, right? I become immediately very anxious and I don't know why, right? So someone could interpret that as I'm being anxious for no reason at all, or I am overreacting, right? But what is happening is I'm having a trauma response that was originated or created in my childhood to a current situation, right? Because I have abandonment trauma, I am experiencing this situation as a trigger, as something that is creating that fight or flight response in me. It feels threatening, it feels unsafe, and therefore I'm fearful, and it creates anxiety for me. So I hope that that was helpful and that makes it sort of clear. And the reason why I wanted to get into that is because, again, the meat of this video, the reason why I created this video is so that to give you 3 different tools that you can use to help you manage your anxiety in the moment. But those tools are not necessarily intended to resolve your anxiety or address it long term. And I generally feel that I would be doing you a disservice if I don't talk about my real approach to anxiety. Now, again, I use both, right? Because there's a variety of situations in life where you don't have time to stop and say, okay, wait a minute, where's my trauma and how do I work with this? And what was the original trauma that caused my reaction, right? And also it's a skill that you need to develop. I've been working in this area for several years, and sometimes I myself need some help, someone else to facilitate for me when I'm trying to get to the original root cause, the original trauma that is causing my anxious reaction at this particular point in time. But it's important that you understand that there is a variety of different ways to approach anxiety, and some of them are long-term and some of them are more short-term. So I think the one thing that I also wanted to add is that in order for you to become more familiar with what your anxiety triggers are, one of the things that I would suggest is that you start becoming more conscious and more familiar with how anxiety feels in your body. So for example, for me, when I get anxious, I get very restless. I can't stay still. I have to be moving. And if I have to sit, then I'm tapping my foot or tapping my fingers. I get very, very anxious, and I get this overwhelming feeling of uncertainty. And I just get confused as well. Like I get very confused about my choices, about my decisions, etc. So I think it's really important to learn how it feels for you. And that's how it feels in my mind and my emotions. But in my feeling, it feels like something in the pit of my stomach, right? So that's true for a lot of people, but that's not true for everybody. So I do think it's very important for each of us to start familiarizing ourselves with how anxiety feels in our body, so that when we start having those emotions or when we start having those physical feelings, we understand what is happening. And long term, if you do choose to take a long-term approach to addressing your anxiety, you now have the beginning of, the first few steps of how to trace back to that original trauma, right? Because what you want to do is start looking for other times in your life, especially in your childhood, where you felt those physical or emotional feelings. Mm-hmm. So with that, I'm sorry, one more thing. I think it's also important for any long-term approach that instead of trying to control the anxiety and like push through it, that we actually take a moment to acknowledge and allow ourselves to feel it. Now, that is another point that is related to the one prior, right? Just learning how it feels for you, but also allow yourself to acknowledge it and accept that you are feeling anxious. Because I think one of the things that I notice that happens a lot, and I used to do this all the time, and that's how I know it happens, is that when we get anxious, we start fighting with our minds, right? We immediately start going like, okay, I'm not anxious. Why am I anxious about this? I shouldn't be anxious about this. I need to calm down. So what we're doing at that point is we're fighting it. and we're giving it more energy instead of allowing it to be there, acknowledging that we're feeling anxious, and using some of the techniques that I'm going to talk about to try and reduce anxiety at that particular moment in time. So I'm sorry, I'm moving so much. I'm just very uncomfortable for some reason. So there's a few techniques that I want to talk about. And again, the intent of these 3 techniques that I want to mention is that you use them at times where, first of all, if you're just starting to learn how to manage your anxiety, these are techniques that are helpful. But it's also techniques that you can use when you're feeling anxious, but you don't have the space to dive into it, or no judgment if you are not willing to dive into it, right? Because not everybody is at a place in their lives where they are willing or ready to dive into the root cause of their trauma or their anxiety, right? And I want to be respectful of that, and I don't have any judgment about that. I think we all have to take whatever steps we need to take at our own time and at our own pace. So, but there are going to be times, particularly for people that, like, if you're a single parent, for example, right, and you're feeling very anxious about the situation that we're living in. I actually was going to record this video a couple of weeks, not now, but in a couple of weeks, but because of I don't want to say the word of what is happening in the world right now, because I don't want YouTube to flag this video, because I've heard that that's been happening a lot. But basically, we are all indoors now for an extended period of time, so a lot of people are feeling a lot of anxiety. So I decided to move this video up and talk about some ways to manage your anxiety as quickly as possible. And I understand there are a lot of parents, that are single parents, and you may be feeling anxious about things, but you have a little child that you're taking care of, so you may not necessarily have the time, right, or the energy for that matter, to start doing deep work. And you just need to be able to reduce your anxiety so you can take care of your responsibilities, take care of your child, of your household, your family, etc. So that's what the intent of these 3 tips are. So without further ado, I'll get started. I know this is a lot longer than I think most of you expected, but I'll get started. So the first tip that I want to give is breathing, taking deep breaths. And before anybody says anything like, oh, I try it all the time, that doesn't work, let me explain a couple of things. When I talk about deep breathing, I'm talking about what is called diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing, okay? Now, the reason why I want to say that is because I was one of those people that, every time I got angry or was anxious or was upset or scared, people used to tell me, everybody's always telling me, take deep breath, count to 10, or whatever the case may be. And that never worked for me. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I realized why that never worked for me. Is that because when people tell you to take a deep breath, they don't tell you how to take a deep breath. They just tell you take a deep breath. And when most people do what I was doing is breathing normally, right? Taking a deep breath into my lungs and then really holding it for a few seconds and then releasing that breath. Well, that is actually not what reduces stress. What is important, or the stress response, when you're doing deep breathing in order to calm your anxiety or to reduce stress, right? What you need to do is take a breath into your belly, not your lungs, but into your belly. Now, obviously your lungs are also going to expand and fill with air, but what you want to focus is, and I'll tell you how I do it, which is the way that works best for me, is I breathe in through my nose, and I let the breath come all the way down into my lower belly, like right below my belly button, like the area of your womb. And I'm not forcing the breath down. I'm just letting it fill that area. And I sort of let it, it's hard for me. I probably should have planned this better. I would have worn something else so I could stand up and you can see it. But basically what you want to do is just get the breath into your belly and sort of expand your belly out in all directions, almost as if you were blowing into a balloon. But I don't want you to force it, because once you start forcing it, it's counterproductive, right? So thus, it takes a little time to get used to it. It took me a few days to learn how to do it. I'm going to actually put a link in the description box for this video with some instructions. I think it's either a video or an article, or maybe both, I don't remember, on how to do belly breathing. But I think it's really helpful to understand that what you want to do is just take a deep breath all the way into your belly and let your belly expand in all sides, not just front to back, but also sides. Feel like you're almost blowing into a balloon, and then exhale through your mouth. So inhale all the way down into your belly through your nose, and exhale through your mouth. That is what is considered diaphragmatic breathing, and that is what helps you regulate your nervous system. Breathing deeply into your lungs has no effect. At least it never had for me, and that is not the technique that is taught to reduce stress. So that is the first tip. Okay? Now, tip number 2 is something a little bit less conventional, but one of the things that I also found very helpful when I was very anxious and I didn't necessarily have an outlet at that particular point in time was to journal. Now, I like to write, but my hand gets tired really easily. So you can, when I talk about journaling, you can just sit down and write, or you can actually, one of the things that I do is I talk into my voice recorder, right? And what I want you to do when you're doing this is just almost freestyle writing, right? So everything that comes into your mind, and these are techniques that I'm telling you to use when you're actually feeling anxiety. So start writing everything you're thinking, everything you're feeling. Don't try to edit anything. Don't try to make it sound pretty. Use curse words. Use whatever you're feeling, even if it sounds absolutely insane, just write it down. The idea is that you're giving an outlet to all of those feelings and all of those thoughts that are ruminating inside of you and that are sort of disrupting your energy flow, okay? So sometimes that can take 5 minutes, sometimes it can take an hour. It depends on how anxious you are and how much you need to get out. If you are someone who, doesn't have a lot of time, like say, for example, you're at work and something happens and you get really upset with your boss, for example, and you need a moment, then maybe recording it into your voice recorder on your phone is maybe the fastest and easiest way. So you could just maybe go into the bathroom or go outside, or into a conference room, close the door, and then just start rambling onto your voice recorder. But for a lot of people, the action of actually putting hand to pen to paper is actually very soothing. And somehow I think it makes different connections in your brain. I don't know the specifics of that, but I've heard that, and I know particularly I feel different when I write things down than when I talk them out. But they both have a place, and I use both regularly. So journaling, just use it every time you're in a place that you're very anxious. Just write. It doesn't matter if it sounds crazy, if it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter. Nobody's going to read it but you. And maybe your therapist if you feel like you want to share it, but you don't have to, right? The intent of this is to give you an outlet for all of those thoughts and all of those emotions that are occupying all of your energy. And the third tip that I want to talk about is called EFT, and I think it stands for, I don't think I wrote it down, but emotional freedom tapping, or emotional freedom technique, and it's also, most people call it tapping. And it's a technique that is used, there's plenty, I'll put a link in the description box here so that you can see the people who actually make this very popular. They have a couple of videos, they have a YouTube channel as well, where they show how to use it for a variety of different things like losing weight, anxiety. They even have techniques, how you can use it, how you can teach children to use it, etc. But so I'll put the link in the description box. But really what it is a technique that stimulates the acupressure points and sends a calming, soothing signal to your amygdala, which is what controls your fight. Why can't I say that today? Your fight or flight reaction. So it actually, there is a neurological and a biological reason why it actually helps calm you down. And it is actually also something that I have used and something that several of my friends have used to calm themselves in situations of anxiety, situations of high stress, even panic attacks, when they can sort of organize their thoughts. And it's really helpful to manage anxiety in a really quick way. And I think, I'm not sure if I mentioned this a minute ago, but the channel does have videos in English and Spanish as well. So again, I will link the channel here in the description box, but I'll just give you a quick example. And I don't know, let me think about something. Let's say I have a lot of anxiety about a presentation that I have to do for work, right? So what you want to do is you want to stimulate a variety of acupressure points in a particular order while you speak about your anxiety, while you talk about how you're feeling. Now, the words are not really that important. What is important is that you're expressing and that you are tapping on the particular point. I'm not sure, I'm looking at the camera, I'm not really sure if you can see me here very well, but hopefully you can. But basically, you'll start tapping in karate chop, I think is the point. I don't remember all the names of the points. You can get all those details from the video, but I just want to give you a quick example of what it looks like. So I said I'm anxious about a presentation that I have for work. So you'll start tapping here, and you say something like, even though I am so anxious and so scared about this presentation at work, I completely love and accept myself. And then you move to the next point. Even though I am so anxious and so scared about this presentation at work, I completely love and accept myself. So you see that I move from here to here to here. And then you can continue saying whatever, particularly if they are negative emotions that you're feeling, or fears or negative thoughts, those are the ones you really want to use as you're going through the acupressure points. So I was in this one, so I am so scared that I'm really going to screw this up. I don't feel like I am prepared. I am terrified that I'm going to disappoint my boss and that I'm going to be humiliated. Even though I am so anxious and so afraid, I completely love and accept myself. All of this anxiety that I'm feeling, even though I'm so anxious, I completely love and accept myself. And you go through that round several times until your anxiety starts easing up. Now, there's a variety of different ways you can get more advanced. Again, you can look at the videos in their channel. I think it's called the tapping solution. Anyways, I'll include the link. But you can look at more videos on their channel. But the idea is to go through all of the acupressure points as you're expressing your emotions and your thoughts, and then that will start easing up. So a couple of modifications that you can do is that you can, also very uncomfortable in this position. You can, at the beginning, you can take a couple of deep breaths, again, diaphragmatic breathing, and then maybe rate your anxiety of from a scale of 1 to 10, and then do 2 or 3 rounds of the tapping, and then take another breath, pause, take a breath, and then rate it again, so that you can gauge if there's been any improvement in your anxiety levels. So those are the 3 tips that I wanted to share with you today. So again, the first one was the deep breathing, right? Yes, the deep breathing. The second one was the journaling, or speaking into a voice recorder. And the third was the EFT, or what's commonly known as tapping. I hope these were very helpful to you. And as always, until next time. Namaste.